Welcome back to Boss Up. I'm Nicole Jones, and on this show, we talk about how to start, grow, and sustain your business. I'm glad you're back here today because I have a very special guest. And if you are the creative type, you're going to want to stick around because I have with me Melissa Mitchell, who is the creator of ABL Creations. Melissa, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I could literally go down an entire list of amazing things that you have done in the art space. You are a self-taught artist.
Yes.
You're an entrepreneur. You're an author, an inspirational leader.
Yes.
I mean, and the list goes on.
For sure.
Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you serve in the community?
Goodness, it's always hard to get it down to an elevator pitch, but I am born and raised in Miami, Florida. I've been in Atlanta for officially 15 years, self-taught, all that good stuff. And so I got my official start in 2014 during that infamous snowstorm here in Atlanta.
Oh my gosh,
yes.
Snowmageddon.
Yes, and so my 8-year anniversary is coming up on Valentine's Day, and I'll never forget. It was like, what am I going to do with my life? It was like, just looking outside. You couldn't leave the house. It was so crazy. And I was walking from the garage because I couldn't leave the garage. So I was walking by, had a box of paint and some old wood. I was like, oh, I could do arts and crafts, just jokingly saying that. And so I bring it upstairs. I start randomly sketching and doodling because I had no art background. It was just like one of those things where you used to be in meetings and you just start your mind drifts off.
Yeah.
And I started just doing that on wood. And I was like, wow, I wonder if I could paint inside of these lines. And so I started doing that and I chronicled it on social media. And people were like, bro, I buy that. I was like, this? I was like, I guess. So I didn't even know I could start selling this stuff. And so it was the way that it started to make me feel and the way that I was able to interact with people just about my story and about, mental health and just about grief and all those different things. And so art became my platform, but my own personal outlet. And so it grew from, something to pass the time to now a full burgeoning career. So it was definitely something that I always say that was a beautiful mistake.
I love that. I love that.
Yes.
A beautiful mistake through art.
Yes.
And you're like,
yes.
People actually want to buy this? I have commission pieces now? How does that work during Snowmageddon? That is so fascinating.
Yes.
So what were you doing in between that time? You're here in Georgia, you found your artistry. What was it like during that time?
So I actually moved to Atlanta to do some nonprofit work. And so once that grant ended, I was like, okay, what's next? And so I have a master's in public management. And so I really have a passion for community and, public health. And so I started working for a government agency and working in IT. And I was like, what am I doing in here? I said, well, they hiring, I'll figure it out. And so I took on the career the same year that I started painting. And so it was so funny that I felt like I was living, I used to see Superman put on his suit to go to work and then he took it off and put on his cape. I was literally living that life. I would go into work, fix everybody's computer, figure out all these things as an analyst, and then come home and put on my scrubs and start painting. And so I worked in IT for up until January of last year. I finally took the leap of faith and quit.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so I leaped into the unknown, and it's been a beautiful leap. Just a year ago, I didn't know what would happen next. I had savings, but I didn't have a plan per se. Mm-hmm. And so being able to take control of my life and just saying, this is who I am, this is what I want to do, it's been so liberating, but also I didn't know that I was almost like I'm an artistic Harriet Tubman because I'm showing people the way. And so I envision myself saying, girl, it's okay, it's safe. You can follow your dreams too. We'll be fine.
Yes.
And so bringing people along the way and showing them that you too can follow your dreams. You can have what you want, you can do what you want, and God will provide. I think a lot of times people think that, being an entrepreneur or creative is a dead-end road, or, you're not going to make no money. But I saw more money last year in my year of faith than I have in my entire life in 1 year.
Oh, that's tweetable.
Oh, yes.
That is tweetable.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
So that kind of debunks this whole myth of the starving artist concept.
Oh, girl.
There's no...
Yeah.
income or profitability in that
No.
particular space. And really, you were serving as like a creative engineer because you were working
course.
as an artist and in the IT space.
Girl,
like, I
bridging
did
that
not
gap.
expect
Yeah,
that
that's
gap to look.
I was talking to a friend yesterday. I said that I was so actively using my left and right brain that I made
Wow.
both sides stronger. Like I would be this super analytical person, but then, I get to rip all of that off and now be an artist. But I had to use the analytical side to figure out how much paint to get. If I'm doing a mural, how many days it would take or how much I should charge, or understanding my time is worth this. And so learning how to delegate, learning how to put together my own website. So it's been so much that I've had to learn on my own, but because I had that full-time job, of course I had a financial cushion, but I also had a lot of skill sets like customer service,
Yes.
customer management,
Troubleshooting.
doing things, getting things, being adaptable. I think, learning as a business owner, you have to be able to say, hey, I don't know how to do this, I know how to do it. It's being honest with yourself. So the level of transparency that I have had to exhibit in my on my journey that's been the biggest thing. Like, look, I don't know what I'm doing. I need some help.
Yeah.
And being open to saying that.
I love the word that you just used, being adaptable.
Yes.
That adaptability, especially or if you are the bosses that are watching the show, kind of in that space where
Yes.
you're balancing the best of both worlds.
Right.
You have your 9 to 5, you have your creative outlet or your service that you're trying to provide outside of that as your additional stream of income.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to learn, how can I apply a lot of that knowledge that I'm using in my company
Right.
that's paying me to leverage in the company that I want to ultimately do full time.
Right.
And you have to learn how to adapt between both of those worlds and
Yeah.
what fits for you.
Mm-hmm.
You may not like where you're currently at,
And that's okay.
but figure it out in
Yeah.
terms of what are some of these resources and tools that I could leverage for my own business. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did.
So it's interesting when everything happened with George Floyd, which was tragic to watch on TV. It was several different wake up calls, not only for me but for businesses, to really realize the disparate treatment of people of color, but also how many people have had to. I had additional hurdles to climb over, being Black, being a woman, being short, being in Atlanta, all the things that you could think of that served as barriers. But that was in 2020 was my year. I said, I cannot allow life to pass me by. And I don't want to give my best years to a company where I could be pouring it into myself. And so that was when I decided to take the leap. And then at the same time, companies started having this guilt where they wanted to do more for Black creatives. And so
Be an ally,
speaking of, resources, there were so many opportunities for Black creatives. And, and even still, companies are still really opening up avenues to really help creatives. And so it was perfect timing for me to take the leap because I leaped right into several grants. I leaped right into a lot of opportunities. And so you really have to be positioned to get those opportunities. You can't just say, I'm gonna quit my job and I'm gonna apply for a grant. But it was 7 years in the making to be prepared for that moment. And so it was absolutely alignment for me to make the leap. And then also, as I was doing that, I was caught by global opportunities to have conversations with other creatives that aren't of color, talking about things that were sensitive, but they had to, if you don't know about Black people, you got to ask a Black person.
Yeah.
So being that person that was able to speak for my race, for my sex, for my, everything.
Your height.
Everything. I was able to be a representative. When I leave the house, I'm the AKA, I'm the Florida A&M graduate, I'm the oldest of Mike and Sharon. I have all of these hyphens, but being able to represent yourself. So every time you show up as a businesswoman, you're bringing all these other hyphens with you as well. And so it was challenging at first just to say, what's my plan? What am I going to do? But when you start just Googling and using your resources at your fingertips, there is no excuse not to be successful. Even when people ask me questions, I said, would you Google it first? Before you DM me, Google it. And I'm not even being, mean. There's so many, like 10 years ago, we couldn't do half. Like when I have little questions like, okay, how many ounces are in, a pound? Like when I'm looking little questions that you can't remember, you can Google. So it comes to business, how should I go about, my business LLC?
Yeah.
How should I file my taxes? There's so much to do now, but the resources are limitless. Like it's just, you can't even imagine what you can do from your laptop, from your house.
Yes.
Yeah.
Literally,
Yeah.
literally. And it amazes me that some of those questions that you're presenting, a lot of people don't take the time to actually research.
People want you to they want you to give them the answers. They want you to give your exact blueprint, and they don't want to
And
do
then
the
don't
work.
follow
But there's a saying I always say, I can give you the entire recipe, but your sauce will not taste the same because the difference maker is me. And so that goes to, having the imposter syndrome or why is Nicole like this? Why isn't Melissa like this? Because everybody has their own allotted timeline, their own blessings, their own plans. And so while you get excited about people that influence you, you have to be committed to your own race because everybody has their own time. What took me 8 years took somebody a month. I'm like, well, I was in this, for so long.
Yeah.
But what I went through prepared me for moments like this. So I know how to show up because I've had the training that God took me through.
Yes, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Oh, that's amazing. Such a fascinating story. There's so much more I want to unravel.
But that was one of my favorite moments of this season.
Oh my God.
Look, and Maria's turning red over here.
Right. He just went in on me for real. I'm like, oh my God.
How do you decide what is a priority at the moment versus something that you can complete at a later date?
What feels right in the moment? Because sometimes it's like, okay, this is really high on my priority list, but I really just don't feel like it. But I think that in order to be productive is like, do what's best for what you feel like in the moment. So if this easier task is easier for you, do that and then tackle the harder task.
In terms of being able to leverage the resources we talked about, Googling, doing your own research, because there is benefit in doing so. You begin to learn different things. You begin to unearth things that you no longer used to research, like how many ounces are in a pound and all that stuff. But in terms of other resources, let's say like a business coach or a life coach or things of that nature, or a financial coach, are those some of the steps that you took to get to where you're at the point where like, okay, now I can submit for a grant. Now I can speak to other corporations about, what's happening in the Black community. Like, did you have some of those steps before you got to the grant
honestly,
level?
I did not.
No.
What's so unique about my story, I come from the home of two pastors. So I have been chiseled for opportunities like this. So I can speak well. I know how to get my thoughts into 30 seconds or 30 minutes. And so, like I talked about, my entire life has trained me for this moment. And so I think that I was just ready for when the calls came. And when in terms of, and I have a public relations background, I've written grants.
Oh, yes.
I've written proposals. So it was almost that, and it's hard for me to delegate because I know how to do so much.
Yeah.
And I'm not a person that often, raises my hand. I'm like, I can figure this out, So when it comes to like the bulk of work, like, okay, I need to call a team in, I'll do that. But like some of this intellectual stuff, it's like, girl, I can figure this out. By the time you pay somebody to help you figure it out, you've already missed the deadline. And so, as I grow, of course, I probably will have to eventually get a manager that goes out and gets things. But I've just been a magnet for opportunities. And I don't say that lightly. It has been, I'm getting emails now from a company that say, hey, we've been watching you.
Wow.
Or somebody said, I need you specifically, where I skip the line and go all the way to the opportunity versus having to apply or those different things. And so I just think that when it's your time, you break all the rules. I have on my phone, my screensaver says, I am the exception to every rule. So if the rule is nobody over 5'2" is getting in there, I said, I'm gonna just go to line. Let me just see. And so I ended up, just finding my way in. But I walk tall with that affirmation. And if I don't get in, it's not my time. It's not my placement. But I do believe that it's always my time. And so because I keep that in the back of my head, I don't allow no's to discourage me. I'm like, well, this wasn't my opportunity. Just move on. I'll be fine. And so just staying focused on what I believe is for me.
Yes.
I can't worry about what isn't.
Yes, I love that.
Yes.
I want to sit on that for a little bit because as people are thinking about, okay, I'm hearing her story, I am also a creative, or I'm also a creative and the creative engineer as well. I'm using my left and right brain. Some of the things that she's saying to me sits with me, like it resonates with me. However, I don't think I have that level of power that she's speaking from. Like she's owning her power in terms of she was already aligned for this. In terms of how you were able to, and I like the word that you used, you were chiseled for this because it was really your upbringing, and you essentially recognized that. You reflected on it. You was like, you know what, I've been made for this my entire life, not knowing it was going to lead me here. Can you speak on the power, or essentially owning your power to actually get to where you are today and be able to do those things?
A lot of people ask how I found my artistic voice or how I find my why or whatever those things are. And I think you doing the spiritual work. For me, I talked about my father passing away 2010. He was my pastor, my best friend, my confidant. But what I learned in that process is that seeking God for yourself, that relationship is far different from hearing about it or coming to church every Sunday like a robot. Like, okay, I came to 10 o'clock service. As soon as that, I'm back in the car listening to Rick Ross, playing loud. Nothing wrong with Rick Ross. But, losing that alignment as soon as you walk out. But when I started seeking God on my own, listening to different resources, really, really honing on the spiritual side, I think that's when I became a magnet. God could trust me spiritually. And I think that's what really happened. It wasn't really like some magical, like, I didn't go to the forest and look up into the sky and I got a light. It was a daily, even now, I'm listening to Bob Proctor on my way in, listening to Catherine Ponder, listening to different pastors that speak on owning your power. So I think it's a daily decision to be great. We just saw the young lady commit suicide. She had one Miss America, one, almost Miss Universe, all these different accomplishments, and even that wasn't enough. So you have to learn that accomplishments and things don't make you, right? And so when you separate your value from winning and doing all these things, you learn that you're still a good person, right? And so it's disheartening that people think that because you made it or you have money, now you're better. And it's like, you really still aren't that great of a person. It's when nobody's watching what you do. It's the still paying for somebody's groceries, that card got declined, and not putting on social media like, I just paid for Nicole groceries. God bless me. And it's like, you don't have to make this a public thing. Like, just pay for the groceries and go in peace. And so I've learned that doing the soul groundwork is what really keeps me, I guess I want to say grounded, but it just keeps me like human. I think that's the difference maker in owning the power, is really, really becoming who you are every single day and just being okay with that. Because people will see my journey and be like, well, why hasn't God done that for me? My stuff is better. I said, it probably will be, but you're not me and I'm not you. And so I'm okay with that. And so once you really own that, you'll be fine.
The internal work that has to get done.
And it's every day.
Yes. And also something that you said made me think, always being a student, because you said you're listening to Bob Proctor and all these different influences in terms of motivation. Like, you're always going to be a student. Even if you reach that level of success that you think that you've won or succeeded at, you're always going to be a student. You're going to hear something again. It's just like reading the Bible. You read it again, you're like, I just learned something different from what I originally got from this particular scripture. So again, it's just essentially being able to know that you get to certain levels, but then you have to then realize you're reinventing yourself every time you get to the level of your success. And then you're reinventing yourself again because you're finding new things and learning new things about yourself along that journey.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome. That's amazing. So let's get to the juicy stuff about more juice. We've talked about some juicy stuff. More juicy stuff in terms of ABL Creations, like your baby, your passion that came out of a mistake, essentially. Snowmageddon itself. Oh my goodness, of all things. What's some of the amazing things that you've done so far?
I every time I apply for funding or something big, I have to list out what makes what was like the aha moment or what made me know. A few of them are when Lupita Nyong'o wore my head wrap in Vogue magazine. I think about winning a Ford Explorer free of charge on stage against some of the biggest brands at the moment. Having an opportunity to have a Spanx bra sold all over the world and still one of the #1 sellers. And then, recently my Foot Locker collection and being on a billboard in Times Square. And then even more recent, just winning a project with Shopify and Afropunk. And so, looking at all of these opportunities, I'm like, I used to say, why me? And then I had to start saying, why not, right? Why not me? And so it's been so amazing to see the affirmation from billion-dollar brands, not just like mom and pop, which is cool too, but brands that I, align with success, right? It's almost
Yeah.
like when I make it to the chair with Oprah, I'll be ready, but it'll
Yes.
also be, I knew this was coming. I don't ever think I'm taken by surprise. I'm like, oh wow, I'm interested to see how it's gonna happen, because I always knew it was gonna happen. I didn't know how. And so even in this moment now, ABL Creations is constantly evolving, learning what's important, what's not important, what to focus on, how to scale up. Do I scale up? Do I scale down? Do I move this direction? Do I hire more people? So it's a constant pendulum of just learning how to just be open, and being open for anybody that has advice, but still knowing that this is my ultimate goal. It's okay to listen to left and right, but staying really straight and narrow is really my focus.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And then you just name dropped some. And I said at the top of this show that there was a list, a Santa Claus list full of amazing things that you've been able to be a part of, which is such a blessing
Truly.
in terms of like that level of notoriety, that level of people noticing your work and appreciating it at that level.
Yes.
And something that we spoke to a little bit earlier in terms of just imposter syndrome, being, not necessarily allowing that to stop you in your tracks. And that comes again from what we discussed earlier. You were chiseled for this. You were basically grew up in terms of being prepared for things like this. Now it's just a matter of following that trajectory based on the creation or the business that you have today.
Yes.
So how does that, in terms of, your team, and you talked about scaling, how does that actually work in terms of, being able to know, am I going to scale up based on these different opportunities? Do I keep the same team? Like, how does that work with
So, like with the Foot Locker opportunity, I had the largest purchase order I had ever experienced was with them. And so I had to hire my entire family because I still was under an NDA. So I couldn't tell everybody, ooh, come to the headquarters and help me do this. And so I decided then that I would hire within. And so I hired my mom as my HR manager, which means make sure my sister do what we give them to do. One of my good girlfriends from college, she happened to be an inventory specialist. And she had just, ended her assignment. And she's like, well, I'll come help. I was like, you'll help? She said, girl, I do this all the time. So I gave her a pile of clothes. And she was done in minutes. I was like, well, let me get another one over here.
Right.
So we were able to I was able to touch every piece of clothing that ended up all over the world right out of my house. And so that let me know that I'm capable of more, that opportunities will come. But when you say scale up, be ready to be up all night, be ready to peel back some layers. I wasn't even getting my hair done. I was so focused that I was like, I've got to make this happen. And so every night I would walk by the inventory and I said, God, you have truly poured the prayer Jabez over my life. Bless me indeed, enlarge my territory. And so as I saw my business grow, I literally saw it grow from my home. And so scaling up to me is scaling up your capacity to do the work. A lot of people say, oh, you should scale up, you should be sold in store. But when you say selling in stores and retail, that is nothing to sneeze at. That is, you're buying SKU numbers. And every size has its own SKU. Like I got down to the nitty gritty. I was like, so now I'm in the store, I'm picking up people's, I said, now you don't know what they went through to get this here. I'm designing, the hang tags. I'm designing the price, the scan code. So I got down to the bones of business. And so learning how to delegate when necessary, but also to committing to learn the whole process.
Yeah.
Because for me, I wanted to learn every part of the process. So when I hand it over, I can say, I understand how to do business in a very intrinsic way. And so thinking about my mom being able to be a part of that and, my dad having the background of apparel design and him passing away, not being able to see this dream come to life, I felt like I was doing this not just for me, but for a lot of people that weren't able to do it. And so that's what's so exciting about seeing all of this happen in real time.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And the fact that you've been able to see this and have a greater appreciation for all of this in a whole new light. Now you're like, you said in retail stores, looking at other people's SKUs and like, that was not something to sneeze at.
It makes you so aware. It makes you really aware of what should and should be done, more ideas. I'm looking at colors differently, like, oh, this is pink, this is red. Even today, seeing how things flow and just being in total alignment with yourself, and then everything around you starts like meshing the same.
Yes. Well, Melissa, we talked about a lot.
Yes.
There's so many more questions I want to
Yes.
ask you. So we're going to stay tuned. You guys hang around with us. We have more information coming for you from Melissa. I want to talk more about collaborations
Yes.
and being able to get grants and
Yes.
all those amazing things.
Yes.
So you guys stick around. Thank you for watching Boss Up, and we'll see you next time.